initially. It seemed more a status thing than anything else. Oh, well, if you said you presented at a lot of conferences and people listen to you and feel how smart you were, then for heaven's sakes, your status goes up. And so, you know, there's certainly some of that in academia as well. That's not really, I like to think, that's not really what's driving me in doing it anymore, you know. It's mainly that it can, it's really kind of a gas to share what you're working on and hear from other people what they're working on. It really is. Anyway, so yeah, it's time well spent, I think. But is it nerve-wracking? Those of you who presented before, did you find it a nerve-wracking thing? Yeah. What's the source of the nerves? Those who've done it before, just general like garden variety public speaking nerves,
and
or something else?
Also just not sure that you really are an expert, because sometimes what I presented on is like, well, how do you consider me the expert? I'm not the big powerful person. I just have done this in my field, but not the expert.
There we go. That sound familiar? Boy, I should pull out those index cards where we all wrote down our anxieties about writing, right? I don't know enough to have anything to say. Comes up a lot, right? Yeah, exactly. I personally think conference presentation is particularly terrific for young scholars starting out, because it's a chance to feel that and kind of go ahead and do it anyway. Because the thing is, I've frankly never been in a, first of all, I've never been in a meeting where people were like aggressive or unsupportive in any, or critical in any way that was not constructive. Like, let's be clear about that. Of course, sometimes there's some constructive, but actually, the other thing that I've really seen at academic conferences is the grapevines. If you're lucky enough to get somebody you really respect in your audience, I've had this experience a couple times. They're almost invariably the most respectful and supportive in giving feedback, at least in my limited experience. You know, I mean, I've never been savaged by somebody I hear who's my hero. I think
educators in general are polite audiences.
Right.
In my experience.
We hope so, don't we?
Yeah. Kristen's saying no. Maybe K-12 is more polite.
When I'm sitting in the audience, I'm like, would you please
I think
your small
that you're
phone?
right.
It's very rude to the presenter. Would you please get off your technology? I would never let my student get away with this.
Yeah.
Well, but when I say polite from the perspective of all the tech conferences I've presented at, I've never had anybody be hostile as far as asking a question, except if it was somebody from DPI.
Yeah, it's kind of challenging, yeah.
I've seen those folks get ambushed.
Yeah.
But
No, that's true. Yeah, I can see that.
But as far as from the perspective of teachers presenting to other teachers, I think there's a lot of deference to expertise, and you know, teachers don't generally blast teachers.
Sure, I think that's an excellent point. And I know I've done this meeting in Chapel Hill several times, and it's very small. You know, you go to the College of Education, and you're in these individual classrooms, and you give your session according to the schedule. Usually you've got about a half hour dedicated to your work, which is usually 20 minutes of you sharing it, either reading a text that you prepared, or which is really 10, by the speed I read, it's 10 double-spaced pages. If you're going to read a paper, 10 double-spaced pages ends up being 20 minutes. And I read more than I speak from, just because I like to stay on top of my time. But in any case, you usually have about 20 minutes to present what you've got, and then 10 minutes of discussion. And you'll have two presenters that are kind of thematically similar will be together, and you'll decide whether you both want to present one after the other, and then have a 20-minute conversation, or 20 and 10, you know. And it's really quite wonderful. I really like this meeting. They call it SEAS, right? The Southeastern Association of Educational Studies. Educational Studies is a big tent. It's basically, I understand that to mean anything you're thinking about education that you want to hear what somebody else has to say about it. Now, strictly speaking, educational studies is frequently the place where we talk about the place where social issues hit school, right? So issues of socioeconomic status, race and ethnicity, bias, gender, sexual orientation, those kinds of issues often get played out in ed studies conferences. But this conference is really broadly like stylized. Like last year I went and I gave a paper that it really started as kind of a blog post that had been rattling around in my mind a long time about the poet Anne Sexton, I just read a book about called Teacher of Weird Abundance by Paula Salvio, who I've got a lot of respect for, which basically was trying to understand why Anne Sexton, brilliant poet, was a beloved teacher while at the same time not exhibiting hardly any of the characteristics of good teachers that we would expect. You know, she was a mess. She was alcoholic. She had really poor boundaries with her students. She was very uneasy. She had serious struggles with mental illness. And so Salvio was trying to work out this question of, okay, how can you be a great teacher if you are at the same time such a broken human being? And I found that a fascinating question. And so I used that to try to understand the writings of the students of another author, David Foster Wallace, who I had a great deal of respect for, who shared a lot of the same problems Anne Sexton did, and whose students similarly adored him. Okay? That's kind of out there, right? But this meeting is all about hearing stuff like that. So I'm telling you about this paper because I haven't done anything else with that yet, but I'd like to. And it's a little outside sort of the ambit of what we're thinking about in education, you know? I mean, how does that impact measurement? How does that impact test scores, right? Well, that's kind of the point, I would say. And that's why I wanted to do that. So I wanted to give you that detail about what I presented there. And I don't know, I'm planning on going again in January, to point out that what you're writing about as you're doing your own daily writing, I don't know if you all are still keeping up a daily writing practice or a regular writing practice. If you're using that to start to think about something in education that's got you kind of working, think about writing that up into something you want to talk to other people about, and take it to Chapel Hill in January. That's my suggestion. If you're interested in doing that, you see, in the past when I've done this seminar, I had a much more kind of structured paper that we were working on, and I made a conscious choice this time, in large part because of Mr. Eisner, to get away from a structured paper and toward the signs of life kinds of expressions. So we don't really have, you're not going to have a paper out of this class by, you know, because of the way the course is put together, that you could then like take and present. But that doesn't mean I'm not really willing to read something that you're working on and give you feedback on it if you want to try this and take it to Chapel Hill in January and, you know, go give a paper and we could go together and it'd be fun.
I would share that I presented and I felt like it was crickets. And in the audience, I thought, like, yeah, oh my God, what did I just do? And I had some feedback that really hurt my feelings. I wanted to cry a little bit. It was very hard. But then, here it is 2 years later, and I'm still seeing people, and I had no idea who they are. They're like, I remember you. You presented in that spring conference, and because of you, we did this.
Oh, isn't that cool?
And I mean, and they're like, oh, you got to meet my department head and tell her what you do. And as I considered it a complete epic failure because there wasn't these burning questions in the audience. And I felt like my feedback was like, you're very young and you speak very fast, and that's very true.
Right.
And like, I was really had hurt feelings. And now, like, it's very strange. It's still the echo effects of that. And I'm sure y'all have probably done that degree true as well, that people come up to you still that you maybe don't recognize, but who you maybe impact on. So that was kind of nice.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
And yes, and being young, that is sometimes people do tend to say, oh, you've not been in the field long enough to really know, but then they have to learn to get past that.
Well, you know, I don't know if there's any musical theater fans in the audience, but as Stephen Sondheim writes in Sunday in the Park with George, we must stop worrying if our vision is true. Let others make that decision. They usually do, right? So, sure. Or as the kids today say, haters gonna hate. You can't really, you know, you can't control what people say and what they bring or anything. And maybe that's another reason why starting some presentation habits early in your career, really great, because it gets your legs under you. And the darndest thing happens when you're up in front of an audience. And actually, like I learned this teaching middle school performing arts, actually, but it counts here too. When you're in front of an audience and being attended as somebody who has something to share, suddenly you seem to have something to share, right? And so, you know, are you an expert? Is there someone more expert? Whatever, it doesn't really matter. You're there, you're doing your thing, and that carries its own affirmation of, yeah, look, I seem to be somebody with something to say. And that's a really cool, I'm very interested in that moment where we can see ourselves as somebody to say, see ourselves as people who have something to say. You know what I mean? When do we stop just being the person in the seminar and start actually having an idea that you care about and want to hear what other people think about? What do you
But
think?
I bet Kristen had some positive feedback, but all what she's remembering is the
Oh,
people who
yeah.
said, but
Oh,
see, what
yeah.
she's remembering is the one, the negative that she
yeah.
heard instead of the positive feedback.
So true.
I think that's incredibly true.
Yeah, because if people are remembering it and coming up to you, that you must have had someone who said,
Well, and so, I mean, some people never turned, and I had a feeling there's probably people who never turned in their forms and they just left that day, but it just kind of sat in the back of their mind
Right.
as, I wonder how I could do
Mhm.
that.
right.
Exactly. That's
So the worst audience you can have for any kind of presentation is, I can remember, I don't know, probably after teaching 4 or 5 years, Charlotte Mack it was right at the beginnings of all the accountability stuff, and I got asked to go to, I think it was Olympic High School in Charlotte on a Saturday morning, and they had forced all these high school teachers to be there on Saturday
yeah.
tough
morning.
room. Oh man.
And I had to perform with now that's probably one time the audience was probably not quite as receptive.
No amount of
It's
donuts is gonna make
understandable.
them happy about being there.
But again, that's a whole different circumstance, but,
Sure.
it's still, even in that instance, the, educators tend to be a little more polite, maybe a little disgruntled in the background, but
Yeah.
it was a good experience.
That's awesome. You know what? I'm sorry, this just occurred to me out of nowhere. I was listening, but 2% of my brain was working on the conference itself. And I just realized it might not actually be in Chapel Hill this year. They haven't got the site up yet. But it's on the website it says biennial. And I was like, what the heck? This conference happens every year, I know. But I just remembered it happens every other year at Carolina. And then on off years, it happens at another campus in the southeast. It was at USC 2 years ago. So it was at Chapel. So that means it's not in Chapel Hill in January. I haven't seen yet where it is, but it'll be close. I mean, Columbia, right? That's where USC is. Yeah, Columbia is
Almost closer than.
yeah, it was actually closer than
Yeah.
Chapel Hill. So that shouldn't be an issue. It's just, but so it won't be at Chapel Hill this year unless they've changed the thing. So yeah. So who's no commitment, but who thinks they might want to pull together 20 minutes of something?
Mr. Juan.
Go to the meeting.
I think Juan should.
Juan, that's for you. I do. Like, I'll hold your notes and stand by you.
She'll be your banner.
There we go.
Good, he's gonna
Well,
think about
think
it.
about it. The other thing is proposals. A proposal is usually like 100 to 150 words, saying this is what this is my work and this is what I do. But of course, very frequently when people write that 100 to 150 words, there is no thing yet, right?
Right,
It's all written as if, oh yeah, and the paper's right over here. No, the paper's not there yet, right? The proposal
here.
is well, for me and for a lot of people, it's a structure to help me keep writing. You see how that is? Suddenly, if I've written 150 words about something and I told somebody that I'm going to show up at a meeting and talk about it, I got to write a paper now,
yep,
right?
yep.
And it's nice. It's
Yep.
nice to have that, and that's good because it kind of keeps us going. You see, am I so twisted by this world I work in that that's a nice thing, right? To have a paper to write, but a little external structure really does help. So.
Yeah,
Okay, well, do let me know if anybody's interested in doing it. Okay. All right. So this is the only thing on our document. Oh, and the second thing is by tomorrow I'll have the readings up for next week. I've been really kind of agonizing trying to figure out which way to go yet. After we did all that terrific work up here, trying to figure out like which angle to go in. So I commit to having those settled and up by tomorrow, so that we can figure out, so that you'll have time to read for the following week. And the last thing, I am very interested in making it possible on November 21st for as many people as can to travel to Boone to go to the superintendent's symposium. So I'm not planning right now, and I don't know if Dr. McGee talked about
Yes,
this.
she did.
Is she planning the same thing?
Yeah, she's planning the same thing, and she's also gonna see if they can stream it for those who might have a distance problem of
good.
getting there, which I know would be beneficial.
Good. Okay. I'm really hoping. I'm sure we'll find a way to
Well,
make
she
that
said if
happen.
they can make it stream, I mean, then I would think that almost everyone, because I've been to one of those with the superintendents, and one's from your,
Yeah, our superintendent's doing
yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah.
So, so my plan right now is 90% sure we will not have class on the 21st, and we'll devote that night either to driving and attending or streaming the because this is also the doctoral symposium that
Right.
happens once a semester, so I really don't want to stand in the way of you having that experience, and if you can get there physically, connecting with the main campus,
Right.
because it's really important, I think, for you all to feel part of that. So that means I have to jigger the syllabus a little